topic to talk about scaling automation and the incredible boost of intelligent automation or hyper automation in the world today, and what democratization of that means. And maybe talk about how we enable it, what kind of groups and companies are a good fit, what aren't, and just maybe get a couple future thoughts. But with that being said, Micah, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'll put it on you. Define the democratization of automation.
Yeah, well, thank you. My name is Micah Smith. I'm a developer evangelist at Automation Anywhere. And really that means that my role is to get people excited about what's possible with Automation Anywhere and what they can do from a development perspective. So this is part of that. How I would define democratization with RPA or with automation is to say, I think there's really two parts of that. The first is how do we bring an application like Automation Anywhere into an organization and make that available for everyone, right? The kind of traditional approach with enterprise applications is like, hey, I'm the guy who owns this application. I bring it in. Anyone who wants to develop on it has to come through me. They have to, get funding through my team, through my developers. And I think that the most effective approach with automation technologies like Automation Anywhere is to do the opposite of that and say, my team is going to run this platform. We're going to set up some standards. We're going to set up the guardrails that everyone should play by. But beyond that, we want everyone in every organizational group to participate in this RPA thing. And so that means setting up bot shells. That means setting up development and error handling and logging standards, and then getting everyone access to be able to participate on the field of RPA. The second kind of aspect of democratization of RPA that I think of is really around how do we get people to participate with bots, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, we've got lots of different groups within our organizations that are building bots, that are building these automations, that are running them and having great success. But a lot of times that's meant like, okay, I'm just going to schedule this bot. It's going to run every Monday at 9 a.m. and it's going to run this report or it's going to do this thing. But how do we get more people to participate in that process so that bots are running not just off of a random schedule, not just off of a file watch or an email trigger, but how do we engage with humans and have bots and humans work side by side more seamlessly? And that's where like the Automation Anywhere robotic interface comes into play, so that more people are participating in what is these automation initiatives rather than just select groups who are triggering these bots, running them off schedules, things like that.
Yeah,
that was way more than you asked for, but that's the short version.
My answer would have been like, it's big. I mean, it would have been much shorter. But I appreciate the insight. And so if I travel back a few years, I remember reading and hearing the quote, every person will have a bot, in 2020 or something like that. And that certainly hasn't happened, though we've taken steps towards that. And I do believe the democratization is going to happen because the access availability of everything going to cloud. The cost of licenses are very reasonable, and then in particular, we'll go through some other things like training and just all the things that are around that you'll need, community marketplace. But maybe just back up. So those are the basics on democratization. Tell me kind of like the 1, 2, 3 from your perspective and what you've seen have been the biggest benefits.
Yeah, so I think the biggest benefit is that it's not just one group within the organization that is experiencing this digital transformation, right? It's able to be something that's organizationally wide. And so when I think of something like document capture, or when I think of something like business process automation, right? Those things really only impact 1 or 2 different groups within an organization. And again, I'm thinking of really large organizations here. But when we think about RPA, there's really no limit to who can be using it. It can be for front office, it can be for back office, it can be for operations, it can be for IT operations, right? It can be for my production monitoring. And so because of that, like everyone-ness of RPA, I think that's where a lot of organizations are seeing the most bang for their buck and being able to bring this in. The other thing I think of is like people who have problems that they didn't really know were problems are able to solve these things, right? And so when we think about the bots that are being created, I kind of think of 3 categorizations. The first would be the bots of like, hey, this is the stuff that we're doing today and we're really struggling with just to keep the lights on, right? The automations that we can do to really take over what is really mundane, repetitive, monotonous work that people are doing. The second is like, what are the stuff we should be doing today, right? And I say stuff kind of literally there, but hey, would we be of benefit if we were able to run those reports that we normally run quarterly, if we ran them weekly or bi-monthly, so that we have more insights into the immediate situations that are going on within our different organizational groups, as opposed to just running them once a quarter or every so often. And then the third categorization, I think, is where people start to get a little more creative, and they say, how can I take the data from one system and take the knowledge that I have of another system and really combine those to be creative about the way that I make data-driven decisions in the future? And I know this is kind of your sweet spot with the artificial intelligence kind of stuff, but how do I take best advantage of the data from multiple systems and create these relationships where no really obvious relationships exist to allow me to make better decisions in the future? And I think that's where organizations are starting to go, and I think we'll go a lot further in the coming years, because I think that's where really the sweet spot of automation and the best bang for your buck is going to be found.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this. So I think I've been a part of a couple of organizations, large ones, who have attempted this route, and it doesn't come without challenge, for sure. I believe this is where we're going. I think we have there's a few hurdles to overcome, and I think they center around a few main points. One is just organizational change management. So it's the fear of all these people are doing shadow IT, what's going on, which leads to who should own it. In my opinions, when I've seen a business buyer own it and at the right level, let's say COO, CFO, it's been much more successful, especially when they have the CIO and that organization hand in hand. So they keep controls of architecture, they have the right governance in place. It's truly a good COE setup for scale. And then in smaller organizations, actually, when it's a little tighter niche, I've seen the CIO buyer being better because they really kind of touch everything, and the relationships and the nature of the relationships are different. There's not as many chargeback bottles. There's a different just vibe, if you will, from a mid-sized company to then a larger one. But in both cases, they're always challenged. And I'd love to hear if you've seen this too. I've always seen the challenges when you just have kind of the fear of the unknown of, wow, we can have lots of people doing this. And we'll talk about, I think, how you overcome that. But have you seen that as well in your world when you've tried to scale this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and definitely to point one that you mentioned, right, with the change management stuff, I think that's where a lot of organizations struggle initially to say like, okay, so you're requesting an account for access for this application, but there's no actual owner. It's going to be a bot, right? And so that's a little bit foreign for a lot of people who are working in change management and access management to say like, all right, I'm going to create this account, but it doesn't belong to an individual the way that all the rest of our accounts do. And that's really the first hurdle for a lot of people who are starting their automation journey, is to say like, hey, we've got some stuff that we want to automate, and we need access to these different applications for that. How do we set up those accounts accordingly? The second part to that is, I mean, you definitely have to have the framework in place for people to be able to excel in this, but also, the safeties in place to make sure that it's not just the Wild West where everyone is able to just create whatever they want and run it wherever they want and have no governance and no guidance in that. And so, like you mentioned, I think it's really important that at least some point, whether it's owned by IT or whether it's owned by whatever group originally started this, to have that governance, have that vision in place to make sure that people who are creating these bots, and we'll talk about citizen developer here in a little bit, but people who are creating those bots have the guidance that they need to be able to create those.
Well, actually, so that's an interesting piece. So the change management, for sure. This is where I've seen, so the two that I've really seen be successful, one successful, one really struggled. One actually leveraged advisors, service integrators, people who've kind of been there, done that, set up their own organization to scale this, create the right COE, governance, architectural requirements, messaging, all the things you don't think about when you're like, hey, just go code, right? And start hitting our systems. And, oh, you need mechanized IDs? Why? I can't use mine. So all the policies and all the governance changes you need, that's the crippling fall that you're about to take if you go down the path as an organization and just open it up with no governance and on any level. So I think having the right partner involved, that might sound a bit self-serving, but the truth is that you really do need someone who's been down the path before, so you can actually accelerate and you don't get caught between the wow, it really took off and now it's really failing at a massive scale. So that guidance, I think, is definitely needed, and I think it's one of the things also that help ease the fears and increase the adoption. You know, you mentioned a term, citizen developer. It's a non-specific product term. It's actually something out there. I mean, maybe give a couple thoughts on, you have a really good background on this too. So just give me a couple thoughts on what that means as relative to democratization of automation.
Yeah, so I would define citizen developer as someone who is developing bots and creating these automations, but doesn't necessarily come from the background of traditional like computer science, doesn't come from that traditional background of development. And those individuals are usually business-minded individuals who are maybe have a knack for IT or at least have a knack for process thinking. But yeah, I mean, I think that citizen development is really how a lot of organizations are really able to scale their RPA initiatives to a much greater degree. I know that some people push back on that, and their immediate thought is, well, if everyone is developing these, low quality bots, then what are we going to have to maintain and run this stuff? But I think that the reality is, and I've seen this from what I've done at my time at TIA, leading their COE, citizen developers are able to create meaningful bots and are able to contribute to the automation initiatives of the organization in a meaningful way. And I think they do that through a couple ways. The first is they're able to create bots that they're able to run to automate their own tasks, right? Something that I do every day, something that we would call this like attended automation, but something that I'm doing weekly, I'm doing monthly. I let that bot run on my own machine. That's automating my own task. That's helping me out. That's giving me a lift so that I can be doing something else with my time. The second is that as they start to develop more experience in developing these bots, you'll see that the maturity of the bots that they develop are much greater than they were before. And we can start to rely on those for, running on schedules and running normally through either triggered by ARI or triggered through email. And so, yeah, they'll need a little bit of extra hand-holding. They'll need some extra coaching. But that's where I think the COE role is really important for scaling and democratizing RPA. It's got to be a situation where someone is coming in, kind of like you mentioned, from a technical background with a bit of a vision, and maybe that's a partner or maybe that's within your organization. But it's someone who's able to provide that guidance and really is kind of got the soft skills and the IT skills, right? So I'm going to help you with that bot shell. It's going to provide the guidance for you to do your development, but I'm also going to help you with upskilling and being able to figure out how you can create the automations that you need to do and learn to use the tools we have internally.
Yeah, it's great. So you talked on something there. I think it's what it is. It's the training. It's the marketplace, and I believe for this to really take off. So because I believe this is the direction, but a few things have to be in place for sure. You have to have a lot of available self-serve training. You also need some mentoring or kind of champion or coaching relationships, and that might be an internal piece. That might be something you leverage a partner for, or some kind of contract. You need the mentoring on-site piece, because as much as you can learn online, it doesn't sometimes capture the business essence of what you need to based on your environment. And so it's made for a one-to-many kind of a build. The other piece I believe is that marketplace, and it's becoming, I think you guys call it a bot store, but the idea is that the citizen developer, they need to have pre-configured, ready-to-go frameworks, basically, that allow for incredible scale, so you do customization as opposed to build new. And if you have training, mentoring, a marketplace, and then a governance model around that, you can really go fast. Especially if the identified citizen developers in an organization, I did say identify, I mean like not anybody should do it. They should identify specific people to do it as opposed to open it up for everybody. But the identified scaled citizen developers would all then be on the same footing and same starting point together. And that goes down the path of certification. What's your take on that, I guess? I mean, I don't want to sound self-serving to you guys yourself, but you guys do a really good job of this at Automation Anywhere of providing all this out there to your partners and others. But is it give me the real? I mean, I've seen it from the service integrator and advisor side. You're on the product side. Is it really a factor for success?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as we talk to different customers, we find that bot store components are really being heavily used, right? And I think you nailed it there with saying that there has to be some level of training and coaching that's available, some level of mentorship or guidance that's available, and then also that marketplace. And so to touch on those, Automation Anywhere offers Automation Anywhere University, which has a lot of free training for people who are looking to get up to speed and get up to the skill level to be able to develop bots. And that's made in a really approachable way so that people who may not have a ton of IT background but have an interest and a desire to learn can go there and get hands-on, get trying this stuff out. We have our community edition available, which is free for everyone to use. That allows you to build your own bots. That allows you to get hands-on right away. I think that's the most effective way for anyone to learn automation anywhere, is to really start building stuff, right? Build something you actually care about. I built a bot that would scrape realtor.com for like realty prices. I built one that scrapes car listings, right? It was stuff that I was caring about at the time, and it allowed me to learn this thing in a much better way so that I could be much more effective when it came to real stuff for work. The other thing you touched on that I want to really hit on is the bot store, the marketplace component. And the bot store is really effective at being able to give people extra tools to be able to build their bots straight away, right out of box, right? And I kind of look at that, especially with the introduction of packages in Automation 360. We're able to make technology available to people that may not be able to understand the underlying technology itself. And so an example of that would be like, there's an NLP package, right? How can we make natural language processing available to people who may not have a huge background in, building their own machine learning models, doing the training, but they can take advantage of a pre-built machine learning model. This is using the Stanford NLP to be able to do some of that natural language processing for sentiment detection and things like that. So with those packages, we're enabling people to do stuff that's kind of above and beyond what they would be able to do just in the out-of-box product. And so there's hundreds of bots, there's hundreds of packages available on our bot store. It's a great place and something that I always suggest to people to check out first as they start a new build. And something I do, right? I mean, I'm using other people's packages, I'm building packages and submitting them to bot store. And so, yeah, I definitely encourage that. And I think it's a great way for organizations to quickly get up to speed and scale.
Absolutely. And do you have to have a computer, or is the cloud? And I don't know the answer to this, so I'm asking too in the community edition, because how do you make this technology and this to everyone? Is it free on cloud, or is it still a downloadable?
Yeah, so it's actually free on cloud, which is totally incredible. You don't need anything besides really your browser and a Windows machine. You would sign up for Community Edition, you register, you can go and set up your bot agent. Your bot agent is a small utility that installs on your local machine, and that allows your machine to communicate with the control room, which is running in the cloud. And once that communication is established, you're able to run bots, you're able to develop your own bots, you're able to do whatever you want. And really, there's a very small footprint, right? That's the only thing that's required. And if you have lots of computers and you're going to go over to your other machine, or you're on vacation or something, you can go and install that same component there. You can keep doing your development. All of your bots are stored on cloud. You don't have to worry about that. You can run them from anywhere.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that goes back to my original statements of, because of cloud, this is going to really now it's enabling it across. And regardless if you get your automation through a product, a cloud, operating, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You're still going to need a good quality set of technology tools. So I don't personally believe that any automation technology that exists out there right now, let's call it RPA specifically, is going to cut it. I think you're going to still need high-end product, the people with real money behind it, because first of all, the others won't keep up, and second, because with the feature sets and the integrations, and second, I think from the scalability and enterprise level of where you're trying to go with this at any size business, from even small, medium to Fortune 100. You need it's still technology at the core that is it's being applied slightly differently and powerfully. So maybe talk about, if you don't mind shifting gears, what's the mindset an organization needs to have? Like, who fails, who succeeds, from your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think an organization has to be ready to be a little bit flexible, like you said, because this is going to be a new thing, right? This is a thing that is different from most enterprise software, like we talked about. And it's going to require change management changes, right? Being able to view our processes, being able to view our accounts, being able to view access to those systems in a slightly different way. So I would say that organizations that are most set up to succeed are going to be the ones that understand that, hey, these bots are a thing. We need to have account access set up for them. We need to have a vision of where this is going to go. And we need to have a definition of what success looks like, right? And so I think those are all keys to organizations having success around this. I think it also requires a pretty flexible skill set. And I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I think someone like a COE lead And whether that's a COE lead who you have internally or whether you bring in a partner, someone who can be both technical visionary and coach. I think those are very important to be able to really guide an organization through what they're going to face, because you're going to face a lot of those weird challenges where, hey, this guy doesn't want to give access to his system to someone who's not a defined employee or stuff like that. And so you're going to have to navigate through a lot of that. And also documentation, right? How do we do that? Release management. Hey, we usually do monthly releases. How do we do bi-weekly releases now or weekly releases now that we're on an automation platform? So those are the kind of things I think that people are going to have to navigate through. But I think those are the things that organizations
you have to use documentation. Did you say that? You still have to have good technology standards and applications of architecture when you do
those things still matter.
Oh.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a thing that a lot of people will get wrong about citizen development, and that's where they'll say, well, this doesn't work. And it's because they're skipping the steps of like, we want to have documentation in place. We want to have guidance in place. We want to make sure that our processes have governance. We want to make sure we're still following our best practices when it comes to release management. Putting a request in, having that request reviewed by the release management team, making sure there's multiple sets of eyes on this stuff, not just saying like, hey, citizen development means everyone can develop whatever they want and run it whenever they want to.
I will throw a challenging thought out there then. That sounds like it really slows it down when you need all that other stuff. So how do you go fast if you have to have all the other pieces in place, or is there a blend? Because I mean, let me rephrase the question and just say, maybe give it more thought. Is I feel like organizations, I don't want them to be turned off and be scared by what you just said, or we've said like you need a lot of change management. I actually believe you can get going very fast. I just believe it needs to almost grow in a 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 type of approach where you're building on, but at scale. And so is that a fair statement that you can start very quickly, get your good technical people who understood the stuff, a good business process person in place, or is it is it really slower than you're saying? I mean, or we're indicating? Because I really feel like it could be faster than what maybe we've described.
I would say, and I'm sure this is like a huge cliche, you have to go slow to go fast, right? And what I mean by that is once you have those things established in practice, right? This is going to be our template for the way that we do documentation. This is going to be the way that we do our requests for release management. Once we have those kind of baseline things established, then it allows us to scale much more quickly because we're all doing our development the same way. We're all doing our documentation the same way. We're all doing our change management the same way. And so now we've got that stuff that's been kind of baked into what our process is going to look like. And as we start to expand, as we start to take on more factories or more federated groups within our COE, then they have that playbook. And for them to be onboarded, we've done this before. And for them to have their first bot go live, we've done this before. And so that allows us to go really quickly once we're starting to scale and once we're starting to expand. So I think what you said, going from the 8 to 15 to 32 or whatever, I think that's exactly right. But I think it does require that vision at the start to say, this is what we want to establish.
Yeah, to take it to a nerdy level, that was a Fibonacci. But
I know, and I totally screwed up the numbers.
He's not a mathematician, people, but he does know automation.
Yeah.
So this is a point of view that I think I share is often is that intelligent automation systems, if you will, not just mean technology, but the people involved, need to be centered around enabling a person to be smarter and faster, and less about just only the automation. The automation should be the benefit the humans receive. And so how do you keep a human maybe in the loop for this? Maybe it's another conversation we should have, or it's coming up, but is that how we're looking at this still? Is that this democratization continually keeps a human in the loop, it just does it at a rapid, broader scale? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's kind of what I was mentioning at the beginning. Like that's the second fold of what I would say is democratization of RPA and democratization of these automations. And for Automation Anywhere, that means using this RA product, which is Automation Anywhere Robotic Interface. And it's really a web and desktop-based interface to allow humans to interact with bots. And the reason that that's important is because humans and bots working side by side is where we see the future of this automation solutioning going, right? It's not going to be just the bots that are running off of a schedule, just the bots that are running off of a trigger of, hey, a file dumped into this directory or an email came in. But it's being able to go back and forth between the bots. Sometimes the bots will have questions and they want the human to be able to validate that. Sometimes the humans will need to kick off a bot, right? And need to give very specific instructions of like, hey, this is the person's account number. go and do this particular transaction. So it's really a back and forth. And that's where we see the next level of automation going, is really this, how do we take best advantage of the back and forth between a human and what a bot can do?
Perfect. Yeah, I agree. And and then also the application of AI in that transition, so the automation improves. So I think that's actually, I think, our next topic we'll be meeting about. And I appreciate everyone who's watched. I'd like to hand it back to Hank. Thank you, Micah, so much for your time today, and everyone who's watched and viewed. Hank, I think back to you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Thomas and Micah, for the great insight today on scaling automation through democratization. Really appreciate all your expert insights. And I wanted to let our audience know that we have another event coming up. As Tom and Micah foreclosed a little bit, we're going to be talking about hyperautomation and the human in the loop. And that event's coming up that event's coming up in 2 weeks on July 1st at the same time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And we'll be happy to see you there and look forward to having you for our next event. Thank you so much for attending.